Hello and welcome back to Investigator Podcast. I'm your host, Chad, alongside my beautiful wife, Sherry. On tonight's episode, we're joined by attorney Ken Good. He's a Texas bail attorney and board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. And with the Trump administration bringing back a tough on crime approach, we're diving into what that means for bail reform, especially after years of progressive policies under Biden. We'll also break down a little bit of the recent ICE raid in Los Angeles and the riots that followed. It's going to be a powerful conversation. Let's get right into it. Ken Good, welcome back to the show. You've been on our show a couple of times, right, Ken?
I have, and thank you so much for having me back.
Not a problem. So obviously everything's been going on. We just covered last night the LA riots, which we're probably going to get a little bit into tonight. But Ken, give us a little bit of the background of what you do as an attorney out there in Texas.
Well, I specialize in bail law, which kind of sounds a little weird, doesn't it? I don't think anybody goes to law school thinking, I'm going to specialize in bail law. I think it's very specialized right now, but I've written articles all over the United States about what is good bail reform, what is bail reform, bad bail reform, what works, what doesn't work. Noted case law. We've had some cases that were used as an example of bail reform, but nobody ever reported that when the Fifth Circuit reversed it multiple times and then said it should have never been filed in federal court. And so, I just kind of feel like if nobody is kind of saying this side of the story, nobody's really telling it, what works on bail reform and what doesn't. I mean, nobody's highlighting the study from Yolo County that is devastating to our far left friends on what they're trying to do to the country.
Yeah. So I remember, you've come on the show a couple of times, and I think that both times maybe was during the Biden-Harris administration. And obviously during the Biden-Harris administration, so many of our listeners know that there was a lot of prosecutors, it seemed like, that were installed or put in place, especially from some of these NGOs. I know George Soros with the Open Society Foundation heavily funded multiple prosecutors across a lot of these major cities. A lot of these cities are also known as sanctuary cities, but people could essentially commit violent crimes, be let out, or sometimes, without bail. Is that kind of what you're referring to? And is that still happening today?
Yes, I would say that is part of what I've been looking into and what I've written articles about. But we have learned so much information about exactly what you're talking about. I mean, these groups are so well organized. We have the first group in this little menagerie. They recruit soft on crime DAs to run for election, and then they give them a whole crap load of money, and it's usually 5 times what's ever been needed to win that race before or ever been spent in that race. And so they get elected, and then there's a second group that invites them to seminars, and they give them a whole bunch of policies, which is almost like a quid pro quo. This is what you will do, and it's terrible policies. It'd be stuff that you would look at and say, this is going to increase crime. Common sense says this will increase crime. They will no longer seek enhancements on drug charges or a whole bunch of charges. They're not going to seek long sentences. And then they have the third group that's going to issue pseudoscience studies that are going to say, when you enact these policies, crime will not increase. And then the final group will show them how to sell that to the public. And now here we are. I would say look at Gascon from LA, who just got his butt kicked running for re-election the second time. And I would say in the last couple of years, we've learned those DA's policies don't work, and they're absolute failures to the extent that they have a very short shelf life. They'll either have 1 term or no more than 2 terms, and the public will turn on them because their policies are so bad.
Yeah. And George Gascon, who you're talking about, obviously one of the furthest left prosecutors out there. And, he was responsible for so much of what has happened, in my opinion, to why Los Angeles went so far downhill. And, obviously we heard, especially during COVID, I think this is really where it started to ramp up, where, these stores were being looted. They weren't charging people for less than $900. And even in most cases, over $900. It was like they were just getting get out of jail free cards. What did Gascon, how much do you think that he actually contributed as a prosecutor, and just the whole bail issue and how all of that worked? How do you think that really contributes to the violent crime or the crime in cities like Los Angeles?
Well, I think that he's the poster child for this issue. And I think we can put we can't put everything at his feet because he was recruited by these groups. And, I think the lesson from this is we should take advice from these advocacy groups on what policy should be, but we should never outsource our policies to these groups, because these groups will never admit that the policies didn't work, because this is what they raise money off of. And so when you outsource these policies to them, that they're just going to argue, oh, we just need more time. It just needed more time for it to work. And so they're never going to give in. And so you have DAs that are either removed from office, or they're recalled, or they decide to retire or not run for reelection. And then if they do, they get their butts kicked. So Gascon is the best example, because we have Prop 47 that passed in California, and the premise of it was we were changing some felonies to misdemeanors, and they were still going to have to answer as misdemeanors, but this would allow them to get jobs. And then on top of that, Gascon said, well, for theft under $950, we're no longer going to prosecute that now that it's a misdemeanor. And that's where a lot of this started. It's just, like a little snowball that just picked up steam and got bigger and bigger and bigger, because when you start no longer prosecuting crime, well, then people see that as, oh, it's okay. Mm-hmm. Stores can't withstand $25,000 a day of shoplifting. Mm-hmm. So they start closing, and then it becomes, it's not safe in that area because of crime. And then, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime. And then here's the problem. The biggest problem is gangs, organized crime, and career criminals just step in and figure out ways to make money hand over fist. And then the way it kills our inner cities is, the last way is property values. Commercial properties in San Francisco and LA are selling for a third to 50% of what they were selling 5 or 6 years ago. And so that's why you're starting to see some mayors come out and go, this is not sustainable. Our taxes are going down. And so that's why I've always been hopeful in this area, because it's not sustainable. It falls apart on itself, and that's what we're seeing. But they're not giving up. We just saw a DA in Harris County where these groups picked Kim Ogg, and then she saw the light and said, I'm not supporting these policies anymore. They don't work. So what did they do? They put up another candidate to run against her, and he kicked her butt in the primary a year ago, March, and he won the general by 1 or 2 points. So we have a new one in Harris County. But with all this stuff going on, he's kind of gone underground. He's been very, very quiet, but he won with tremendous support from these groups.
Yeah. And we were talking about the Open Society Foundation, or also known as OSF. Now, it was founded by billionaire George Soros and has been a huge financial backer of progressive criminal justice reform, including efforts to reelect far-left prosecutors like we're talking about. And some of these prosecutors, Larry Krasner, Philadelphia, Kim Fox, Chicago, Illinois, George Gascon, Chisa Boudin, I think is the name, San Francisco. Mm-hmm. These prosecutors are obviously elected on platforms focusing on ending cash bail, reducing incarceration, decriminalizing low-level offenses, and prioritizing social justice over the traditional, I guess, tough on crime approaches. But now, these funding and advocacy groups, you're thinking, you're talking about like Color of Change PAC, the Justice Collaborative, the Fair and Just Prosecutions, the ACLU, which is obviously, I think they're about to sue, if I'm not mistaken, Trump with the Los Angeles riots and all this stuff. What do you think? Obviously it's a coordinated effort, but what is the purpose of a society like the Open Society Foundation, George Soros, and so many of these outside NGOs that want to heavily fund these far left prosecutors that obviously it seems like, and we've talked about it many times on the show, it seems like if you want to destroy the fabric of America, you do it from within, and you do it by electing these far left prosecutors, letting out the worst criminals, and then trying to bring in as many more criminals as you possibly can, whether that's through wide open borders. And it just, it envelops into just chaos. What do you think the overall goal of this is, Ken? And is there a way that this can be fixed, even with Trump being in office right now?
Well, I think there's probably multiple theories, but I have 2 theories that probably would explain this. But I would start with, it's a coalition. So, not everybody in the coalition agrees. But I think first I would say the largest budget item for a county is law enforcement. So anything that they can do to cut that budget, and they can then move that money to social programs, which is what they've done in areas where they've, cut the police funding. They just move that money over to social programs. So I think if you give them, I think part of it is to get more money for the programs that they want to push. But then I think there's a second theory on, they've drank the Kool-Aid and they thought, we're going to take these policies into our urban areas, which are strong Democrat strongholds, and they're going to be so successful. Then we're going to be able to take them all over the United States and prove that this is the way to do criminal justice. I don't think it's the second one because, if it was, then they would be admitting it's not working and we would be trying something else, but they're still pushing them. They're still pushing them even today. So I think it's either the first one with a little bit of this social justice thing, which just gets on my nerves so bad because it's really saying we have to put up with more crime. Mm. And if we just said, will you support more crime? I think the public would just say absolutely not, especially the way they present it. Because when they're saying, oh, we're doing these policies to help a specific minority, what they don't say is when crime goes up, it's that same minority groups that get hurt the worst, the first, because when crime goes up, it goes up in our minority communities much quicker.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And, to the narrative, and I don't want to stay on the Open Society Foundation, but, they do also support mainstream media and academic projects and colleges and, all across the United States. So it's almost like, where they fund the prosecutors, they also fund the media, and then they control the media to a point where if they need to activate their troops in some ways, right, the social justice warriors, the people that we are seeing across streets right now, the people we've seen during BLM riots and Antifa riots, they can utilize media to activate the people that then also they have the prosecutors in place to make sure that, hey, those people are not going to be prosecuted. It's almost like a green light, like you said. The question is, it's obviously in most of the big cities. These are the far left leaning cities that this is happening. Is this still going on today? I mean, are we still seeing these far left prosecutors being put into office even as the Trump administration just kind of had a landslide victory?
Well, I mean, I would say it has slowed down greatly. And I read an article recently said that there's only one Soros prosecutor still left in office in the state of California. So I would say they're still trying to put up new candidates, but the problem is their existing ones have a very short shelf life. And I think that, if you want to know how big this is, you could argue that these groups are a shadow government right now. You could argue that Biden's administration outsourced all of their criminal justice policies and immigration policies to these groups. And, you could even say that Mayor Adams in New York, when he didn't support the party line, that's the reason why he got attacked. That's the reason why he had charges filed against him. And I would say if you agree with that theory, then you would look at what's going on in LA right now, and you'd say it's all orchestrated response from those groups with manufactured signs, and they're just reacting to what Trump is doing, and they don't like it, and so this is their response.
Yeah. So you as an attorney, Ken, what are you kind of focusing on to try? Is that kind of your main goal, is to try to fight against this and against these liberal or left or far left prosecutors, or what is your mission as an attorney yourself?
Well, I like to talk about what are good criminal justice policies, what are good bail reform policies, and I like to point out what doesn't work. And a lot of these policies that you can talk about in our urban areas are just bad bail policies. So, like, we just finished a legislative session in Texas where they passed major bail reform, and it was on the side of criminal justice, strengthening the criminal justice system. So it would be good bail reform. Anything that strengthens accountability and puts penalties when you don't do what you're supposed to do, if you don't show up for court, and that's going to strengthen the system. I mean, the problem that people don't realize is when you make it easier for people to miss court, cases get put on hold, and that creates big backlogs, and backlogs are pressure to dismiss cases because we're always adding, on average, the same number of cases to the criminal justice conveyor belt that has to get through the system in a year. And so if you slow down the cases that get through, then you have a bigger backlog. Backlogs create pressure to dismiss. Dismiss cases is considered a green light for criminals to commit more crime. And that's what we're seeing in our urban areas.
Yeah. And we're going to get to the LA thing because I want to talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But I would be remiss if I did not ask you about Letitia James and Alvin Bragg in New York, the Southern District of New York. Obviously, the Southern District of New York, they have had a lot of very high-profile cases. I believe they are also the ones that are taking up the P. Diddy case. I think they had the Epstein case, but also they had the Trump case where he was charged with 34 felonies. Mm-hmm. Most of these charges were originally misdemeanors that were then upgraded to felonies because of the, I guess, statute of limitation. I'm not exactly sure how that all works. But when people see this, right, I mean, people see, stuff like George Gascon in Los Angeles and all these sanctuary cities where they're letting off criminals right and left. But then you have someone like President Trump that was charged with 34 felonies. People look at our justice system right now and they're like, man, is our justice system really the best justice system in the world? Because a lot of people don't necessarily believe that. I hate to even bring this up, but we've been watching the Karen Reed trial. So there's a lot of speculation. Like, did Karen Reed actually hit her husband, or is this some type of coordinated effort in some way, shape, or form? How do you see the justice system right now, just in whole, outside of the far left prosecutors that are being put in place in America?
Well, outside of the far left prosecutors, I would say we have the best criminal justice system in the world. Is it perfect? No, but it's the best in the world. It tells you how politicized they can be all over the world, and we have to work to get politics out. But when you talk about examples like you've mentioned, Ms. James, where she ran for election on "I'm going to get," Trump. Yeah. I mean, that was her whole promise. And you just look and see what's happened to her since, and you go, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Mm-hmm. I just think that here's the problem we have is when we have these prosecutors that have this criminal justice reform and social justice reform, it turns our criminal justice system into something that's only going after political opponents. Or that's the way the public sees it, because we're being so forgiving for our allies, and we're being so destructive, and we make up new theories for people who are our opponents. And so the public sees through that. They see that as not fair. It's not fair on either end of the spectrum. It's not fair for crime in our inner cities, for the people we're just telling them you need to put up with more crime. And it's not fair to your political opponents to be punishing them just for their beliefs, which I think you could make a very good argument, especially with Miss James, with the way her campaign was being run. And she's an attorney. We're supposed to be careful about anything that would create an appearance of a bias. Well, she not only created a bias, she ran on a bias, mm-hmm. and she executed that bias. I mean, you can't say that she didn't do exactly what she promised. And before she was elected, I mean, I tell bondsmen at times, if you have an assistant DA who gives you the benefit of the doubt on a close call, then you have an assistant DA worth their weight in gold. Because Miss James is an example of not only did she have no doubt, she would not give any benefit of any doubt to Trump. How many other people did she disagree with on the political spectrum that she decided, I'm going to prosecute you and I'm not giving you the benefit of the doubt, which is not the way our system is supposed to work.
Yeah. And like even with Alvin Bragg, for example, I mean, he would come out. He is a huge prosecutor for the Southern District, I believe. And, he comes out and he has all these press conferences talking about, hey, we're going to prosecute Trump. We're going to put him behind bars. We're going to do all this stuff. I mean, is that normal for a prosecutor to do? Like just be out there? And it's like you said, obviously showing a bias.
He's even worse because he initially declined to file charges after he got elected against Trump. Mm-hmm. And so he originally said, reviewed the case and said, we decline. And then all the other cases fell apart. And so then he stepped in under political pressure to file his case. And as you mentioned, the charges they took him under were misdemeanors, but they had to couple it with some other action to make it a felony to get around the statute of limitations. But the problem is when it was presented to the jury was told you had to couple the misdemeanor with a different charge, but the jury could pick it, and they didn't have to all agree on which one. And so, they did, and that's never been done before.
Yeah.
And so the jury was allowed to do backflips on theories of the law that have never been tested. And that's why I think a lot of people, I did an interview last week that was 2.5 hours, and somebody was attacking me about Trump and a convicted felon. And I'm like, well, first of all, his case is not final. It's on appeal. But second of all, you had your shot, and the majority of the public evaluated what y'all did and decided that it was all for political reasons. And they did not like it. They rejected it, and they elected him president of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that shows too. I mean, everything that's went on the past 4 years, you would think that these people would wake up and be like, okay, so there was a landslide type victory from Trump, and everything we did absolutely backfired. And yet they're still trying to do it, which makes no sense to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look at Biden, who declined to invoke executive privilege on behalf of Trump. First thing when there was a dispute over something regarding the Trump first White House. And so Biden said, no, I'm not invoking the executive privilege because he's the only one that can invoke it. So, I mean, can you imagine what would happen, if Biden, I look at it, if Biden passes away and his supporters want, a national funeral, Trump is the type of person that would say, no frickin' way with the way he's treated me and my family. And he will not care at that point. He just won't care because I think there is no other individual in the Republican Party or in the Democrat Party that could withstand what he withstood and still get reelected.
Yeah. I also have to ask you too, because this is not necessarily about bail reform, but you see Trump making decisions that is, he's essentially trying to make better what the decisions by auto pen that, Joe Biden did in his presidency, which we still don't technically know who was actually running the White House or our country during that 4 years. I mean, we know that Biden was heavily degraded as far as his mental capacity. He was on stage. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that speculated they put him on drugs when they went out there just to try to get through teleprompter. Who knows? We don't, this speculation, but either way, this guy is someone that has access to the nuclear football, and, he has all of our most important secrets and all this stuff. The question is, though, do you think that with the way Biden was and especially everything he did, now Trump's trying to kind of reverse a lot of these things that was damaging our country. And now you have these federal judges that are basically making these rulings against the president of the United States. Is that a legal thing? Like, is that constitutional that federal judges can come in and say, hey, you can't deport these people. You can't deport these people. We're making federal rulings. What side of the fence do you err on that? Just as far as legality, is it constitutional for a court or a federal judge to do that when a sitting president actually issues a deportation order for a certain amount of people or whatever?
No, I mean, we're not being told the truth on these issues. The issues are so complicated. The level of due process that's applicable in a given situation varies. I mean, if someone's already been subject to a deportation order, nobody even talks about how the only due process they're entitled to is a writ of habeas corpus where they deny they're that person. I mean, that's it. And so a lot of these things that they're saying, they haven't received due process. Yes, they've received due process. They already have an order from the immigration courts of removal that's been appealed and sustained. So we're just, and we've got the separation of the different branches. We've got the legislative, we've got the judicial, and we've got the executive, and we've got the judicial trying to take over the executive branch. And I'm going to tell you, my position is I don't think they even think they're going to win. That's not the purpose of what they're doing. Their purpose is to slow Trump down. He's only going to be in office for 4 more years. In some ways, he's already a lame duck. But so he's been in office for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. They've only got 3.5 more years to go. So I think what's going on is they're just trying to slow Trump down, and with the hope that in 4 years the Democrats will come back to office. But the way things are right now, and what the Democrats are, what hills they're dying on, I mean, they could be in the political wilderness for a decade if they're not careful.
Yeah. And it seems like that's what kind of they've done to themselves. And obviously you're from the state of Texas, and Texas was a huge state during the border crisis over the last 4 years. And, I know your governor, he worked very closely with Trump. There's a lot of people that have kind of said, did the governor do as much as he could? There's a lot of people that said, maybe he didn't. I don't know. But either way.
Oh, no, absolutely. He worked very hard to oppose the Biden administration on immigration policy. And the state of Texas stepped up and spent about $9 billion trying to step into that void that the federal government under Biden would not do. And the two-faced part of this is when Biden decided to run for re-election and he was announcing his successes on the border, he was citing Texas as his success in decreasing the number of people who crossed the border, when everything that Texas did was in spite of him and was spending its own money because he refused. And yet when it came time to take credit, when they saw what a terrible issue it was, they just absolutely lied and claimed it was all because of their actions. And so, I mean, they just alienated everybody in Texas.
Yeah. And that border issue with Texas, Texas DPS.
Yeah. When there was a standoff. Do you guys remember there was like a standoff?
We have border counties in Texas that voted for the first time Republican. I mean, it was like 7 or 8 counties. It was a huge deal in Texas.
Yeah. And so, and that's the point is, like, I guess, obviously the federal authorities during that time, ICE and U.S. Customs Border Patrol, obviously they're under the command of the president or Department of Defense, whoever. But I guess Texas Department of Public Safety didn't really have a say necessarily as much in what was going on at the border. How was that fight? I mean, do you recall like what the fight was?
Oh, absolutely. So, there was a lot of things that would go up in the courts, and early on there were policies, where they were setting up barriers, and the federal government would sue to take them down, and the government would win at the U.S. Supreme Court. And so, the governor called up the Texas National Guard. They were doing all kinds of things. They got smarter at it. And, they started winning a few cases at the end before Trump came into office. So I think they were smart, and but what Governor Abbott would say is, we stepped in and did the job that the federal government refused to do. And I think the public, and the way the border counties switched from Democrat to Republican, I think the public completely supports what Abbott did on these issues.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what's happening in L.A. is the exact opposite or reverse of what went on in Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and some of the stories that you're still not seeing reported, especially you're not seeing it in California and L.A., but, California decriminalized marijuana, and also with their open borders, you have cartels, not just for Mexico, but for other parts of the country, bring their whole operations into the United States. In California, they would, look for federal land, and they just take it over. And the legal marijuana market in California that was supposed to be raising all this tax dollars starts filing for bankruptcy because it's being taken over by the cartels. I've posted a story about that before the election, and it immediately got deleted. I've never had a story that I've shared on Facebook get deleted. And I'm like, what's the deal? I thought it was just a mistake. I shared it immediately again. It got just immediately deleted. No comment, nothing, just deleted. And I was like, well, maybe I've just been tricked and fooled. Maybe that's really not happening. Well, then Trump started talking about it. Yeah. And then after he won, shock, they quit censoring the cartel stories. And it's my belief that anything dealing with cartels and drugs being brought over illegally for the borders, anything that was other than just people who want a better life, was being censored before the election.
Oh, it's wild. I was saying on last night's episode that during the last 4 years, I mean, we would post something on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and it was just useless for us. That's why we really didn't do a lot of it. We haven't grown hardly at all on Instagram and Facebook because everything we post, if, you know, and the weird thing was I started researching, is like, if they tie, you know, obviously our name on our social media is Investigate Earth Podcast. We take out the conspiracy part or any of that stuff, but they still somehow, I believe, connect the algorithm. The algorithm connects our name on social media to our podcast platform. And so therefore they automatically kind of censor us. As soon as Trump got in, we actually started getting some waves. So we have videos right now we've been posting over the past 4 or 5 days, especially about this LA thing. And we've got probably almost 1 million views on like 5 videos. And so there's been a huge change. And obviously Mark Zuckerberg, as soon as Trump got elected, he's like, oh no, we're going to not censor anymore. We're all good now. And we never wanted to censor. Yeah, we never wanted to censor. But as you said, you could have stories that just disappeared. Now, the LA riots that's going on right now, you know, how much of this reminds you of the 2020, you know, summer of love, as they called it? You know, remember when CNN was on the news, and I told everybody, we just got a merchandise store up, investigatorstore.com. And I told everybody last night, I said, I'm going to have a store, or a shirt, and I want a shirt that has like a news anchor and he's standing there. And then in the background, I want like the buildings on fire, and I want the bottom of it to say mostly peaceful protesters, because that's what they called them in 2020. How do you see these LA riots in comparison to 2020? And what do you think is going to be done with the people that are arrested? Do you think they're still going to maybe be let out, or is the federal government going to step in and prosecute them?
Well, okay, so I think the federal government will step in and prosecute. They're going to be pushing the full weight of the U.S. Attorney's Office behind this. I think it's very similar to what happened in 2020, where it's all about messaging and not about the truth. What scares me is I've talked to a couple of people in the last week, and I had one person tell me, "Oh, I went to Minneapolis during those riots, and they were peaceful. I mean, there was not any damage." And I was like, you know, there's not really anybody that believes that anymore. Then even the governor of that state eventually called the National Guard, and that was when it stopped. It wasn't until then. And so I think, and then somebody was telling me, oh, I mean, there's been all these stories in the last 2 days. Oh, well, they're just peacefully watching cars burn. So if you send the National Guard in, that's going to agitate them, and that's going to cause, and they're saying, oh, the proliferation of the violence is Trump's fault because he sent in the National Guard. Well, that's bullshit. And that's all messaging, because they don't want to be blamed for it. And so everything is Trump's fault. I mean, it's just ridiculous. If you look at the sheriff for LA County, he's done kind of a complete 180. Oh, we don't need him. We have a process now. Oh, now it's a problem. Well, I mean,
and I saw that literally yesterday.
This is where we are in politics. You can't work with each other anymore if you're from different parties. They can't work with Trump because he's a Republican. And so you hear all this crap about how Trump is a threat to democracy. And I've really concluded Trump isn't a threat to democracy. Trump is a threat to Democrats. And that's the reason why they react the way they do.
Yeah. And to your point, Los Angeles County Sheriff, can't remember what his name is right now, but he is a native of Mexico. Obviously, he is in a lot of his press conferences and everything. It seems like that he has been heavily siding with the rioters, and I'm calling them rioters. Now, not all of them are rioters. I mean, there are definitely some people out there that are protesting, and there are people that we talked about last night. They're a lot smarter and coordinated than people think, right? So if you, it's interesting, if you watch some of these videos, you'll have a police line, and then you'll have a line of protesters. And then on the other side of the block, you'll have a line of protesters and a line of police. And the police, it always seems like, are holding back the protesters from going in one direction or the other, but they're protecting the people on the inside. And the people on the inside are usually the ones that are throwing bricks, rocks. They were throwing fireworks, mortar rounds at police.
And soft water bottles is what CNN reported.
Yeah, they're just throwing soft water bottles, guys. I mean, this is nothing, even though I think they were probably frozen water bottles.
Yeah, but one of the things that nobody realizes, let's go back and look at these other situations, they goad the police. And then since they are in Democrat strongholds, then they'll pick something out and then they'll file suit against the county. And so it's an activist group funding the lawsuit against a similarly minded county or state. And what do you know? A year or two later, they give them a huge settlement saying, oh, they were wrong, that the activists were right and they were wrong. And it's just ignoring the law, and it's just funding the activist group for the next thing. And so I would have thought 5 years ago that you could have never convinced me that these were orchestrated, well organized, and probably by these same groups that are pushing this crappy bail reform or bad bail reform in our urban areas. But they are, and the biggest shock to me is that's come out after Trump has been reelected is that they figure out a way for the taxpayers to fund all this crap through NGOs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's what they do.
I mean, that's insulting.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing. I mean, all the stuff that we see, a lot of the stuff we see that's wrong in our country, a lot of the riots, a lot of the coordinated efforts. We actually just posted a video on Instagram yesterday that shows these pallets of bricks and cinder blocks showing up right around where the riots were going to be.
But wait a minute. That was because there was a Home Depot right there.
Ask these people, are y'all in favor of illegal alien criminals coming into our country? And that's what they refuse to talk about. They refuse. These are hardworking people who just want a better life. Well, wait a minute. So you're saying you're in favor of setting up policies that ties the hands of government so they can't even address hardcore criminals, gang members, drug dealers coming into our country? Because that's what they've done in the name of we just want to be compassionate. I mean, that's so similar to what they've done to bad bail reform, bad criminal justice reform. We just want to be compassionate. So they tie the hands of the judges so they can't address the truly bad elements.
Yeah. Ken, have you been in politics before ever? Or, I mean, do you work a lot with politicians?
I do I have my own podcast called thebellpost.com, and all we do is criminal justice issues, and we just address what works and what doesn't work. And I go to the legislature and I testify on bills. I mean, this legislative session just ended last week, but I was there to testify on a bill for 3 minutes, and I pissed off some people, and so they ended up questioning me for 45 minutes. And they thought I would back down and I wouldn't have the data to support my position. And we do this all the time. So absolutely I had it. So they were very frustrated that I wouldn't back down because I'm right, or I believe I'm right. And so, no, I haven't been in politics other than that.
And what was that issue that you were in the legislators campaign?
Well, see, there was a Representative Moody from El Paso, who had proposed a bill to do a presumption of a personal bond for all misdemeanors across the state of Texas. So if you're arrested for a misdemeanor and state jail felony, you're just going to be simply released like they do in California for all misdemeanors. And the Yolo County DA was on my podcast and said, and we have an 80% failure to appear rate on all misdemeanors in the state of California. So, I mean, 80% failure to appear rate versus a less than 10% for the bail industry. You can imagine what damage that does to the criminal justice system very quickly. And so they thought, oh, well, no, that's not right. I'm like, well, yeah, here's the studies that support that. And here's a website, Harris County Court Watch, that has 2 years worth of data from Harris County using simple release mechanism from 90% of all misdemeanors. And they have an 80% failure to appear rate on average over 2 years. Well, that can't be right. Yes, it is. I mean, the sad thing is y'all did a settlement where you enacted where y'all built a new web system to specifically track these things. And that's what the system you built spit out. And so now you're saying, oh, well, that's not good data. You can't rely upon that. Well, of course you would say that because that's what you built.
Yeah. Have you, obviously you're out there fighting for, the not to release people based on misdemeanors or declassification of felonies or whatever. Have you done any research on like political prosecutions from people on the other side? So say that you're in a far left city, like say Austin, right? I don't know for sure that Austin, Texas, it has a liberal prosecutor. I would assume they probably do.
They do. Very liberal.
Yeah. So, but what if, say, for example, you have two different scenarios in Austin, Texas, and you have one guy that did something, but he maybe did something in a, I don't know, say a rally or a protest that was a pro-Trump protest, and he got arrested, and yet he was charged. He went through the whole system. He got jailed, all because the prosecutor said, well, you know what? He's on the wrong side of the political party. Have you done any research into political prosecutions and how that really is affected? I mean, obviously, Texas is not necessarily a state where you have as many liberals or I guess far left prosecutors, even though I think it is becoming more of that because of Joe Rogan.
Yeah, everybody's moving to Texas now because of him.
There's a lot of people moving to Texas out of California. They're either moving from California to Texas, Tennessee, Florida. Usually those are the three big states. But is there... How do you protect people on the other side that, you know, instead of them being lean on prosecution, so they're not really prosecuting people, how do you protect the people on the other side of the political fence where they are politically prosecuting people for example?
I think that it's very difficult. And there's a good example of this. And it's kind of dated, but, there was probably a speaker of the United States House from Texas. And so he pushed some changes in Texas through on, probably some how districts were drawn. And it was intended to increase the Texas delegation to be Republican. At the time, there was a Democrat prosecutor in Travis County. And so they had a public integrity unit that's been taken apart now, and it filed charges against him and convicted him, and it was intended to run him off, and it was successful. And the problem is, years later, his conviction was thrown out, and so that's what I see is what's going on with Trump is all of those convictions, they don't care about them now. All they cared about was to try to defeat him from being president of the United States on a second term. That was what they were doing, and that was the sole purpose of them, to try to keep him from winning another election. I would even argue that Biden's whole strategy for his reelection bid was to have Trump convicted, have all the Republicans run away from him, and then the public wouldn't care whether he was mentally fit to run for a second term because there would be no alternative. And I think that strategy blew up in his face.
Yeah, I agree with that. And do you think, although Trump is in office, do you think he's really in control still? I mean, we've talked about the deep state a lot, right? So we know that Biden was in office. He obviously wasn't running the White House. I don't even think anybody in the White House was running the White House. I think it was operatives somewhere in the mix, maybe intelligence agencies, whatever. We don't know for sure. And even with
Well, I think a lot of the groups, they outsource policies, like to Soros's groups. I think he was running criminal justice policy and probably immigration policy. And so he was telling them what to do. Or his groups. I really do believe that.
Well, with that being said, though, what do you think the purpose of that is? Like, what is the overall goal of these open society foundations? What do you think it is? I mean, besides just bringing in, I just don't believe it's for social justice reform. I really don't believe they actually give a damn about the people supposedly that they're there to protect. I think there's a bigger agenda. And I mean, have you thought about what that agenda may be?
Well, but, there's so many different theories on that. One of the theories is that, Soros makes his money from chaos. So the more chaos there is, the more opportunities he has to make money. I mean, he made billions of dollars betting against the pound, against the Bank of England. I mean, and the chaos that he created for the country as a whole was very large. He didn't care. So, there's one theory that says that he's trying to create chaos so that he can have more opportunities to make money. I don't know whether that's true or not. A lot of people just think they're true believers. I kind of agree with you. I don't think they care about these people because right now these policies have been proven not to work so strongly that if they really cared about these people, they would be wanting to do something else. But there was one of these Bannon Institute for Justice is one of their supported groups. And so, they came out yesterday with something saying that Trump and his order for the National Guard, this hasn't been done since 1965. I mean, it's a go-to group by the New York Times to make it sound like it's a legitimate group. And it's really one of these front groups that do pseudosciences. I mean, I wrote an article in October of last year saying, here's all the reasons why you should not believe the FBI statistics. And there was a bunch of reasons. And all of these groups, including the Bannon group, were writing articles, releasing studies saying crime is not increasing and you don't have to believe us. Look at the FBI statistics. And then 10 days later, after my article was published, suddenly the FBI statistics had been updated, and they showed crime had increased. Well, right on time, a week later, the Bannon Institute issued a new study saying, well, at the very least, crime is not increasing as the result of criminal justice reform or bail reform. Hogwash. Hogwash, hogwash, hogwash. These are pseudoscience. They're cooking the books just to make it appear like to support what their other groups are advocating for. And so whenever you see justice in their name and they're advocating for bail reform, it's just one of these front groups for them, and they're so well organized. But when you say, what's their motive? I don't know, because they should have already acknowledged it's not working and moved to something else.
Yeah, I was literally talking about that today. I remember a couple of years ago, there was this group that started posting, I guess, how you can go to certain, like say you go to Los Angeles County Sheriff's or inmate search, and you can look up inmate search. You can look up their bookings. You can do that in Los Angeles. You can do it in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, whatever. Well, if you went to these sites during the Biden-Harris administration and you would say you saw a 2-page list of all black offenders, let's just give an example here. But yet, if you go look at what their actual designation is, it says white male on every single one of them. Now, the interesting thing about that was I saw this on X. This was a couple years ago, and I was like, there's no way that shit is really happening. I started going to these places, and I was looking up, what the booking was, and it would say what they were charged with, white male, I think height, some of this other stuff. And damn if it wasn't white males on all of these people throughout various places, whether it was Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, whatever. But that was one thing. But then also during the Biden-Harris administration, they stopped making the FBI report crime statistics in all of these major cities, just like you're saying. So in, these groups that are also funded, and also, I believe, for example, Alex Soros, that was meeting with the Biden-Harris administration. I think they said he met with them like 26 times in the White House. That's George Soros' son. He's likely going to be the one that takes over. There was a post I saw yesterday that showed Alex Soros hanging out with Gavin Newsom like 3 weeks ago, a month ago, whatever it was. And it's like, I wonder why what's happening in Los Angeles is happening. And then, these people are also the same people that are telling you that, we're the hottest we've ever been on a planet. I'm not going to get into the climate change thing, but we've done a whole episode on that, where if you look back in the 1930s and 1920s, it was actually hotter in the 1930s than it is today. People, they definitely manipulate data, and they use it for their advantage. And guess who manipulates the data? It's the people that are over all of these conglomerates. So, just like Fauci used to say, I am the science. Well, he kind of is, because whatever Fauci and the conglomerate says, that is what they say. That is what goes. And that's what the people believe. Not all people. That's what my mom believes. That's what probably a lot of our moms believe, is because they watch mainstream media. And Elon Musk just said something yesterday. He said, imagine the people that only get their news from mainstream media, and imagine what their mind still thinks today versus people that actually have access to other information. It's a scary time we live in, Ken. And I guess the question is, do you see this getting better or worse? Because we have Trump in office now. And I've told people when Trump came in, I said, look, just because Trump is in office does not necessarily mean everything's going to get better. I knew that they were going to come out of the woodwork during Trump's administration. I knew that for 4 years, when we had wide open borders, where there were Chinese nationalists, there were people from the Middle East, there were terrorist cells, you name it, the cartel, everybody coming in. I said, they're not bringing these people in for no reason. they're going to activate these people at some point in time. And guess what? I think they're doing it now. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. And how is the justice system going to respond to this, Ken?
Well, I heard the best explanation I heard about these open borders, and it just was real simple, but it made so much sense. And they were arguing that when we do a census, we count people, we don't count citizens. And so when California has so many more illegal aliens than anyone else, they end up with more representatives for the House of Representatives than they should. And I think the person making this argument said that on whole, from the last census, the Democrats have 10 more seats in the House than they would have had, but for open borders and bringing in illegal aliens. So that's a pretty simple argument, but it makes a lot of sense because suddenly their vote is much more powerful and has so much more weight than the other states, because they're bringing. I mean, and it is done, and it's done at so much damage to their own state when they do it, but they don't care.
Yeah. I agree. And, on this show, we talk so much about like conspiracy and a lot of the corruption. By the way, I think conspiracy theorists are like 5,000 to 1 right now, or whatever that record is that everybody's
saying.
How
many conspiracies during COVID turned out to be true?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the biggest test right there.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then what's going on in California right now? I mean, it just seems like, and the mainstream media, when Trump got elected, when he first got elected, the theories were, well, they don't like him, but by the end of his first year, they'll acknowledge and they'll be okay. That never happened. And I don't think it'll happen this time either. I mean, I think it's Trump derangement syndrome like we've never seen. But the problem is, in my lifetime, whenever they treat a Republican and they treat them really, really bad, that's the new default. So, when people say, oh, it's just Trump. No. It's going to be every Republican from now on will be treated this way. And suddenly, we have the Democrats throw a big fit if they don't win, and then they do all this extracurricular stuff when the Republicans try to lead. And we've had former examples, George Bush II, where he left under such a cloud because he wouldn't stand up for people. He wouldn't fight back, and he just finally said, "I'll let history determine what kind of a president I was." And I really think it's those kind of actions that people just said, I'm voting for Trump. He'll fight back. And honestly, when I voted for Trump the first time, I did it reluctantly because, he wasn't a politician. My favorite meme of him says in Trump's first presidency, he was doing something he wasn't comfortable with. He was pretending to be a politician. In his second presidency, he's doing exactly what he knows, and that is he's taken over a bankrupt company. So, but the second time I voted for Trump, I was a little bit more stronger because I thought what they were doing to him was bad, and it was just all politics. Third time, I would have crawled over broken glass to vote for Trump because I thought that if we didn't stand up and fight and say what they did was wrong, then we were going to lose our country, because then it worked.
Yeah. I do fear what would have happened had, the opposite happened, right? Had we had Kamala Harris in office right now, or
change two things. The Supreme Court, imagine what would have happened if they would have got Gorsuch on the Supreme Court even. And then Biden getting elected. Or really Hillary getting elected. Those were pawns for whoever's really making the decisions, to whoever they outsource their policy to. And I think the Soros Group is a big one. The interesting thing for the next election is, the Biden coalition is the Obama coalition is dead. His coalition was Wall Street funded the elections, and then they ran on social issues, and Wall Street didn't care about social issues. But I don't think that the party today will stand to even have the Wall Street support. They don't have room for them in the party. Yeah. Obama's former chief of staff, who was the mayor of Illinois, I think for a while, mayor of Chicago for a while, and I can't remember his name. but he is now working in Wall Street and he's talking about running for president. So it looks like he's trying to recreate that coalition. But I mean, the problem with him is he's so cruel and he comes across as, really hate. I don't think he really has a good chance of running or winning the primary. And, so it's going to be very interesting because I would argue that the last 2 or 3 candidates from the Democrat side have been selected by the elites, not by the faithful. And you're going to have such a blowback from that. This time they are going to select a far left candidate because they're going to say, well, the reason why we've lost is because we haven't been left enough. And I know that that's absolutely not true. That's the reason why the elites have stepped in to keep them from selecting the candidate. But more power to them. I mean, that's the reason why they've been losing. They haven't been policing their own party, and they've got it. And so they need to lose. They need to lose a couple more times before they'll start moderating.
Yeah, and I think they create the social issues is the interesting thing. They have to create the social issues to run on, because otherwise, what are you running on? And that is their thing.
We've already done this whole debate about Soros. What's their motivation? What was the motivation to identify transgender, which is probably less than 1% of the population? Why do they just select that as a hill to die on? Now, I could make a really strong argument that the reason why they did that is because they're picking issues that they're saying these are other people who are getting picked on, that are getting mistreated. And so minorities, remember how you were treated, and you should vote to prevent that on them because it happened to you as well. It's identity politics. But I think the identity politics may be dying right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think even with this, Trump ran on, by saying we're going to close the borders, and every single person that is coming illegally, we're going to go and find them and we're going to deport them. That's what he said. Even though once Trump got in, he kind of backed off of that a little bit to where Tom Homan came out and he was saying, look, we're not going to deport every single person. We're not going to go in neighborhoods and start finding people, but we are going to go after the criminals, the people that are here that we know for sure are criminals. They're cartel members. They're whoever. We're going to go after these people. The people that the ICE and Border Patrol and all those people are going after right now are the people that are violent criminals or violent offenders or people that have criminal records. These are the people they're going after. But this is what the left has to use right now. And they're going to do anything. They're going to use mainstream media. We've watched the difference between Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and CNN, MSNBC, and all these other mainstream outlets. They're going to heavily promote and prop up what Trump is doing so wrong by kidnapping these people. That's what they're saying. These agents are coming in and kidnapping people like a horrible dictator.
The Maryland dad, for example.
Yeah, the Maryland dad. And then,
oh my gosh. Yeah. Maryland dad. I mean, that blew up in their face. But what they keep forgetting is Trump is, like a servant on these, PR issues, public relations. It's almost like they stepped into a trap. I think the beauty of Trump too is that he's working so hard. He's planned for 4 years on what to do, and he's going to outwork them. They can't keep up with him.
Yeah. You know what I fear about Trump, Ken, is, and I've said this on the podcast many times, we voted for Trump, obviously. I don't even know. I think a lot of people voted for Trump in this last election, but the one thing I fear, there was a press conference where he brought in Larry Ellison and Palantir guy and some of these AI guys where they're investing $500 billion into the United States. One thing I worry, obviously, from this podcast perspective is Trump obviously sees this as a massive investment, or like the AI investment with Sam Altman and Larry Ellison, which was the Oracle owner. And a lot of people think Oracle, which is on most software network computer systems in America, a lot of people believe that Oracle was actually created for the CIA to monitor certain computer systems or whatever. But Trump brings in these people. Trump's one of those people, just kind of like with the vaccine, Operation Warp Speed. He kind of got behind that. The Democrats, by the way, during the COVID thing, when Trump brought out the vaccine, they were like, oh, no, there's no way I would take a vaccine that Trump came out with. And then as soon as Trump left office and Biden and Harris was in, they were like, oh, guys, everybody, we got to take the vaccine now. We got to make sure we're taking our vaccine. The thing that worries me is like Trump is, obviously, if you're president, you want to take credit, especially on a $500 billion investment from an AI company. But what we do know about these AI companies is that, although we may utilize these AI systems for good, if we look at China and how advanced their AI is for mass surveillance. Now, we definitely love law and order here, but we don't want a surveillance state. We don't want a state to where AI runs and controls every single thing we do. They know every single action we make on a daily basis. And now with this new plan that Trump's kind of getting behind, it is worrying a lot of people. And I'm behind Trump. I just don't want necessarily Trump to be inundated with people that is going to like give Trump that ego boost to say, hey, Trump, we're investing $500 billion. We need all of these facilities and you're going to be the guy to do it. But then, it may not happen for surveillance when Trump is in, but Trump's not going to be in forever. And how are the next presidents? How is the next administrations? Maybe they become far left and they want to surveil all conservatives. They're going to have that tool then to do so. And that's why a lot of people are talking about the Palantir and the AI technology and the investments that the United States government is making now. I know this is pretty deep, but all I'm saying is there's a lot of worrisome stuff, even with Trump as president. It's just but
Trump is a transactional president. I think that's the best description I've heard of him. I mean, it's all about the business transaction. So when he has those types of get-togethers, he's all about how much money is coming to the United States, how much money is being invested. I agree with you on the future, but I would argue that for the last 4 years, we've lived in a surveillance state. I mean, if you think back when Trump ran the first time and he won, coming out of that election, the major complaint from the Democrat parties to the mainstream media was you were not hard enough on Trump. You allowed him to come on your show and spout these lies and you didn't call him on it. Now, in that election, they would have two guests, one for and one against, and they would introduce them and they'd let them duke it out. But ever since then, now we're in this new period where they bring in MSNBC, CNN, CBS, ABC. They bring in a Republican. I mean, look at the Jake Tapper interview with Trump's daughter-in-law, and they let her say her thing, and then they just belittle her and call her, you're picking on someone's stutter. How dare you? I mean, he's apologized for it, but he was doing that solely for the purpose of trying to defeat Trump and do what the Democrats told him he failed to do in the election before. And that's where we are now with politics. And how do we go back from that, where you bring in a guest and then you introduce them, let them say their thing, and then you just call them a fool?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken, I do want to say this because, we've had you on the show a couple of times, and for people that are listening, it's people like you that we have to have in society and in the world today, attorneys that are out there fighting at the legislator level and trying to get things done. Do you ever feel like that you're fighting an uphill battle with a lot of this stuff?
No, I don't, because I feel like Trump a lot of times. I feel like Trump is one of those really unique people. He's got enough money where all he cares about is what is best for the country. We can argue whether you agree with what he thinks is best for the country or you can disagree with him. But I think by the time he leaves office, we'll all agree he tried to do what he thought was best for the country. And I feel like that's all I'm doing. I'm telling you, here's my analysis of the policies. Here's my analysis of what's been tried. Here's what has worked. Here's what has not worked. Here's why it has not worked. And these people that push those policies will not admit they have not worked, and they still push them to this day. Why would you go through what this other jurisdiction went through? Because you're going to get the same result, but they're still telling you that's the gold standard that you should be doing. I don't feel like that's hard. I don't feel like, and I feel like the data there's a growing set of data to support that, which is making it easier.
Yeah. And I do have another question. Are you in trial? Like, do you do trials and stuff, or what exactly do you kind of fight now? Do you represent people or?
So I represent bail bondsmen across the state of Texas, but I also represent, agents when they're getting licensed. So I travel the state on licensing issues. So I go to administrative boards a lot. I'm an old appellate attorney. That's why I like to argue legal issues. So I've argued cases before the Supreme Court of Texas, the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas, the Fifth Circuit, pretty much all the Court of Appeals. I haven't, in the bail area, there's two cases that were argued before the Court of Criminal Appeals, which is our highest court for criminal cases, and I won both of those. So I have an active practice, but it's mostly bail related now. I used to just do 50% bail, and then 50% I would always have a civil practice. I always had one large case going at a given time, but it seems like as I become more specialized, I have less and less time.
No, I get it. Well, listen, I do have a proposal for you. We have some trials coming up now. So we covered trials decently. Mm-hmm. We actually covered the Idaho 4 murders, not the trial. Obviously, it's not come out yet, but we covered that. We've covered a little bit of Karen Reed trial as well. This Karen Reed trial, but the Idaho 4 murder trial with Brian Koberger is coming up maybe in August. But it would be actually really cool to bring you on some of those shows to give analysis. Even if we kind of give you a breakdown of kind of what's happened over the past few days. I know you probably don't have time to watch the cases. Sherry does all that. I don't have time for that either. But if we had kind of a breakdown of stuff, would you be interested on coming on some shows to kind of break down just some of the things? If we play you some clips and give your thoughts on how the attorneys are presenting things or not presenting things?
Sure. I'd be happy to, I would be happy to do that on a trial basis to see how it goes.
Yeah, sure.
Actually, that's right up my forte. I've always been an appellate attorney, which is, that's the fix-it guy for the trial court. And so I've always been grading attorneys' papers on what they were doing at trial, and mostly about, okay, we didn't do this. I had one case where my trial attorney came to me and said, well, the judge, I convinced him to change his mind and to let this in. And I'm like, well, he just committed reversible error. And I said, let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to win. They're going to appeal. And 2 years from now, the Court of Appeals is going to reverse and render in their favor. So what are you going to do in the next 2 years? So when they do that, you still win your case.
Yeah.
And so we set up an alternative thing that we did so that even if they did that, he would still win. And what do you know? 2 years later, they reversed and rendered the case because he had talked the court into doing something he shouldn't have.
Yeah, that reminds me of today's Karen Reed trial, man. This judge in the Karen Reed trial pisses me off. And the funny thing about this trial is that Karen Reed, it was a mistrial the first time. She's now on trial again a year later, and it's like the prosecutor is kind of an asshole. And I think the jury kind of sees. I mean, wouldn't you agree with me? A jury sees when a prosecutor presents himself as an asshole, especially, and then you got a defense team that they're very well liked. Alan Jackson and that defense team are very well liked. The jury seems to kind of get on board with them more than the prosecutor. And it seems like every ruling that the judge does in this case is for the prosecution against the defense. Wow. Do you not kind of see that? Like today, for example, I know we're getting a little bit off topic, but today.
No, but that's that's the opposite of what usually happens, because usually the court rules, defensively will rule in favor of the defense, so they won't have that argument on appeal, especially in criminal cases. So to be arguing or ruling almost exclusively in the prosecution side, that tells you that the judge that tells you one of the things that you could conclude from that is the judge thinks they may have a problem with their case, and so he's trying to help them.
Yeah, exactly. And today there was a medical examiner. She's also taught at Brown Medical School. She's done all of this stuff. And one of the parts of this case is that he has supposedly he was hit by a car by his girlfriend. And one of the injuries on his arm looks to be dog bites from the house that he was at. And so this medical examiner, she's like, I've seen and examined probably 70 plus deaths from dog bites. And so I am an expert. A federal court ruled in one particular case that she was on about a dog bite that she was an expert. And yet this judge ruled that she could not testify on the dog bite and the pictures based on she didn't believe that she was an expert. And so it was asinine. But yet then they allow the prosecution to bring in quote unquote experts that are not experts in their field. And so it's pretty obvious there is a bias in that case. But that's stuff that I would like for you to maybe come on the show and talk about. And Ken, I think you'd be good to have your own show doing trial breakdowns.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you. That's a nice compliment. But, I'm shock. I'm swamped as I am. I decided I was going to work last night. And so I drank some coffee and then I decided not to work. And so I couldn't go to sleep, but I was up early this morning driving to Fort Worth because I needed a judge to sign 15 orders for me. And and then I had to be back for this. And then tomorrow I'm going to be speaking at a conference of district and county clerks in Sugar Land, which is just south of Houston. And then the next day I'm going to be in Houston at a bail bond board meeting to answer some questions on a relicensing. So that's my normal week. So I just don't know when you have time. I mean, and I already do a podcast on criminal justice issues, but I agree. I think that would be fun, but
just gotta make
I feel
time
like I'm caught in the mafia right now. I do all this work and I'm 64 years old and I was like, I can't get out of it. I can't retire. I just keep getting pulled back in, and I love it. I don't have any plans to retire as long as I'm healthy.
Well, once you retire, man, that's when it all goes downhill. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, that's right. But I'm kind of hyper. But my wife's 10 years younger than me, and she's planning on retiring in 3 years. So I'm planning on retiring when I either have really bad health issues or I die. And so
there you go.
I'm just too hyper. I would drop. My wife would kill me. And she's also an attorney, and she says she's smart enough that she thinks she could get away with it. And my fear is that I think she's smart enough as well to get away with it.
I think Sherry is too, because she watches all these damn shows, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I think she might be able to. Ken, can you tell everybody where they can go to support you, follow you, whatever you got? Just tell everybody on the show now.
Sure. If you want more information about our group or our issues, you can go to pbtx.com, which is the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. We have a blog where we highlight important criminal justice issues. And we also have our own podcast. There's a link to it on our menu, but we can also go directly to it at thebellpost.com. All we do is talk about criminal justice, bail reform issues. I mean, we're fixing to do a series of episodes on just what passed at the Texas legislature.
Awesome. And guys, we'll put those in the description as well. And we'll put our merchandise link with our new Mostly Peaceful Protest shirt, which we're going to have hopefully soon. That'll be good. And hopefully Ken is going to come back on some trial episodes we have in the future.
That would be amazing.
That way you don't have to devote like a lot of time. We'll just send you a couple of clips and then you can kind of break down what you think about them.
Yeah. And then I can do my little research and tell you. And maybe surprise you with some stuff.
Absolutely. Well, Ken Good, thank you so very much for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure as always, and we can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a good day.
Hey, you too.
You too. Thanks, Ken.
All right, guys, that was Ken Good, a great friend of the podcast. We've had him on a couple times. Love talking to him every time we do. He's just very knowledgeable. And as I said, man, I wish he had a freaking YouTube channel. There's a lot of people that have YouTube channels.
We need to just clone him is what we should do.
I know, right?
Clone him.
An AI?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just download his information, and we can just have Ken Good on without Ken Good having to do anything. That'll be great. No, Ken's a great guy, and he is he's working his ass off for the state of Texas, but not just the state of Texas. I mean, the bail reform stuff, all the stuff that he's testifying in front of the legislators. These are the people and the attorneys we need to fight back against the Soros and the Open Society Foundations and everything that the far left is doing to try to destroy America from within. And if you don't think that stuff like this is important, I have something else for you, because as we talk more about the NGOs, the non-government organizations, and the people that are in charge of these that are trying to take down America for the globalist movement, we talk about these all the time. And so if you want to know the other people fighting on the other side of this, that is Ken Good. And so we appreciate people like Ken Good immensely. And we hope that there are more people like him out there. But guys, make sure you go follow him, go show him support, send him a message, do whatever you got to do. But we're going to end that here.